For whatever reason, Protestants really seem to get up in arms when Catholics talk about the Blessed Mother. So I thought we could maybe do that today. And, they accuse us of being idolaters. They accuse Mary of being a demon. I'm not kidding. I've seen that on Twitter. I'm not even going to put the screenshot up because I don't even want to acknowledge that. It's blasphemous and it's disgusting. But I thought we could maybe look at some of these notions today. One of the first places I wanted to start, actually. So again, I'm kind of looking at some of the general principles of these things. But look, first of all, if you want to talk about Marian intercession, this is in John's Gospel, chapter 2, right? You can see it right here. Jesus literally works his very first miracle at the intercession and instigation of his Blessed Mother, right? It's almost, there are ways that, you read the text, whatever, where it seems like, right, Christ isn't ready to do this just yet. And it's his mother that pushes him into it, right? Jesus says, my hour is not yet come. She turns to the servants, do whatever he tells you, right? And this is the beginning of Christ's public ministry, literally done at the intercession of the Blessed Mother. Okay. Obviously, though, I think the best place to start, we'll start here. This is Luke's Gospel, right? Chapter 1. Okay. With the Annunciation of Gabriel. Here we go, right? Okay, there's a number of things we talk about in this text. I want to just maybe hit a couple of them. First of all, we have the beginnings of the Hail Mary here, right? For all these Protestants that talk about, well, where's the Hail Mary in the Bible? Here it is, right? You have the beginning in Luke's Gospel, again from Luke's Gospel. We see, we'll see this when we come to Elizabeth, right? The visitation of the Blessed Mother to Elizabeth. And then finally asking for her intercession at the end, as it tells us in the letter of St. James, right? To pray for one another. But anyway, okay, we have here, full of grace. This is one of those first ones, right? Obviously. And again, this is something that should be so well known by now. I'm still amazed that people don't get this. Okay, kekaritomene in the Greek text, right? It's obviously a difficult word. I'm not sitting here pretending like I'm absolutely fluent in Greek. I read Latin, much easier. Greek, I know the things I'm supposed to know, right? If you know what I'm saying. So in Greek, kekaritomene, it is first of all a perfect passive participle. It's a complicated verb of denoting what's the right perfect tense, right? So this is something that has been finished. It is passive, right? Something that, again, Mary, this is a singular grace that is granted to her. It is something that happens to her. But it's also that sort of participial form, right? It's something that, as it says, has been favored, but continues to be favored, right? One who has been and remaining full of grace, right? The word for grace in Greek, charis. We get the word charism in English, right? So one who has been and is graced. This is a singular verb in all of the Septuagint, in the Greek Gospels, right? Even in, Acts of the Apostles, when St. Stephen says at his martyrdom, when he becomes filled with grace, it is an entirely different verb construction, right? So first of all, that the Blessed Mother, and even too, notice the angelic salutation, right? It's interesting. St. Thomas, in his commentary on the angelic salutation, on the Hail Mary, right, notices here that Gabriel addresses her actually as a superior, one who as an angel is ahead of Mary, right? He's an angel, she's human, right? And yet addresses her as a superior here, again, kind of signaling the singular grace that's been given to her. Okay, so she is kakaritomene, right? Full of, having been filled with grace and still singularly, right? Filled with grace. And this is important for a number of reasons. Again, I don't want these videos to be overly long, so I kind of want to hit the high points. But one of the most important parts, we talk, obviously what I'm getting at here is the Immaculate Conception. One of the most important parts, at least to consider for this, if you want to understand how Catholics think about this or how we address this, is the very notion that Christ takes his human nature from his mother. I mean, quite literally, he takes his human DNA from the Blessed Mother, right? The Holy Spirit comes upon her, right? So Christ is singularly and miraculously conceived in the womb of the Blessed Mother by a grace of God, and yet Christ still takes his human nature from the Blessed Mother. given that Christ has come to redeem our human nature, it was sort of unfitting. And this is where the Immaculate Conception comes from, why it's been, when you read a lot of the, especially the Eastern Church Fathers, right? They're some of the ones that kind of begin this theological thinking that Christ cannot have taken a wounded nature from the Blessed Mother, that since he has to take his human nature, that he is going to reconcile back to his divine nature, but that he takes his human nature from the Blessed Mother, it has to be a complete human nature, a full human nature, in other words, or something like that, that is not wounded by original sin. And thus Mary herself has to be free of original sin in order to give Christ that human nature, that he can reconcile it back to his divine nature. Okay, and again, there's so much stuff that could be said about this, but I want to move on because there's so much that's going on. Okay, first of all, the next thing, right? Mary's perpetual virginity, it's right here in Luke's gospel, right? So Gabriel tells her, obviously, she will conceive, the Holy Ghost will overshadow her. I mentioned that in the last video, right? Something that is also just used in speaking of the Ark of the Covenant, which I'll come to in just a second. Not the overshadow part, but we talk about the Ark of the Covenant again. And she will conceive the Son of the Most High. Okay. And Mary talks about how shall this be done? Where are we? Here we go. Because I know not man. All right, this is interesting. It says here, Gabriel is sent from God to Nazareth to a virgin espoused to Joseph. Okay, right? Now, ordinarily, when a young woman, a virgin, is espoused to a man, they're married or they're about to be married, right? A young couple, you would expect them to conceive and bear children quite soon, actually, I think, right? If this was something that, Mary was expecting to do, to have normal marital relations with Joseph, and the angel shows up and says, Mary, you will conceive and bear a son, I think she would say, I sure hope so, right? That's how normal married life usually works. The fact that she asks, right, how this will happen is sort of, it really is kind of interesting, because it sort of implies here that not only does she has not had relations with man so far, but it seems to imply too, again, that she intends not to, right? Now, this sort of marriage is not unknown. It's spoken about, I believe, in the book of Deuteronomy, right? You talk about the sort of these sorts of virginal marriages. Fine. My point simply is that if Mary had intended to pursue usual relations with her husband, the news that she would conceive and bear a son, it wouldn't have been all that shocking, right? The fact that she reacts this way kind of says that, or at least implies that she intends to remain a virgin despite her marriage to Joseph. Right. Not to mention too, when people bring out all the other, the James, the brother of the Lord, and so on. Again, I don't know that I need to go through all that. It even says in the Gospels themselves that those Jameses, those other brothers of the Lord, it mentions that they have different mothers and fathers. Right. So there is no scriptural evidence that Jesus actually has siblings at all. This is something Protestants invent. They read into the text, despite all their sola scriptura nonsense, to sort of already in back up their own interpretations of Scripture. Anything to deny the special place the Blessed Mother has. Speaking of the special place the Blessed Mother has, although again, there's so much to talk about. Let's move on. This one I sort of mentioned in the last video. You saw some of these overlaps, right? Let's see. Yeah, there's 2 Kings, right? So when she goes to visit her cousin Elizabeth, okay, first of all, here's the other part of another part of the Hail Mary, right? Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb. Okay, these parallels. How is this to me that the mother of my Lord should come to me? Right. And the remaining with Elizabeth for the 3 months. Right. We go right back to, for me, this is the second book of Kings in the Douay-Rheims translation. It's 2 Samuel if you have most other translations, right? Right here, back to back, verses 9, right? David talking about, how shall the ark of the Lord come to me? And the ark of the Lord abode again outside of Jerusalem for 3 months. Again, right? I'm not drawing any real hard conclusions here, but simply, right? If you believe that the scriptures are inspired by God, that this is a singular grace that God gives to the sacred authors to write this down, these parallels back to back, right? How shall the Lord come to me and dwelling for 3 months? And how shall the mother of my Lord come to me, Mary abiding with Elizabeth for 3 months? That these happen, that these are back to back like this. I'm sorry, that can't be a coincidence if you believe that God truly inspired the scriptures. Again, something else to discuss. One of the Mary's queenship. Everybody, Protestants hate Mary's queenship for whatever reason, but again, this is in the scriptures, right? This again, for me, third book of Kings in the Dewey-Reams translation. It's the first book of Kings if you're using anything else, right? In the Old Testament kingdom, right, the mothers of the king have a very special place. Have a very special place in the kingdoms of their sons, right? This is also one of the things people point out in the Old Testament kingdom. The queen is not the wife of the king, right? When you go back to the Old Testament and you look at this, the queen mother, this is a whole thematic thing in the Old Testament, right? The queen is the mother of the king, right? He even and reverences her. She has a throne, right? She sits on a throne next to the king at his right hand and even intercedes for people that come to see the king, right? Again, this is biblical. This is scriptural. This is something that, again, if this is inspired by God, it is done so with a purpose, right? Especially all of the women that are laid out in the Old Testament too, right? Most you have to ask again, right? All the characters in the Old Testament, right? You talk the big ones: Noah, right? Adam, Eve, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the patriarchs, and so on. Everybody is mentioned who is named, right, for a very specific reason. They play some role in salvation history, and of course, most of the male characters are all prefigures of Christ in some capacity or other. So when the Old Testament mentions the women, right, it's worth at least reflecting on. Why? Who are they pointing forward to, right? Anyway, again, I don't want the video to be overly long. I wish we had all day to talk about this sort of thing, right? But again, if you understand Old Testament, the kingdom of the Old Testament, and that it is supposed to prefigure the new covenant, if you want to say Christ is king, then the mother of the king is the queen, and she has a special place in the kingdom, and she intercedes for those even who come to see the king. Okay, finally, one of the last things I just want to mention, because I've always found this interesting as well. Okay, and this is the Apocalypse of St. John, the book of Revelation. This is the end of chapter 11, right, where he has the vision of the temple of God in heaven, and the ark is seen in the temple. Lightnings, voices, earthquake, and so on, right? Okay, everybody knows this, and everybody knows the opening of chapter 12. A great sign appeared in the heaven, the woman clothed with the sun, and so on, right? And very often we interpret this as a vision of the Blessed Mother, and in part it is, and in part it isn't. But this is because we're dealing with the Apocalypse of St. John. There's a lot of imagery going on here, and a lot of these images can be interpreted in different ways. The only thing I want to point out here is that you might say, well, what does this have to do with one? It was the end of the previous chapter, talking about we see a vision of the temple in heaven and the ark of the temple. Next chapter, the sign of the woman in heaven. Cool. The only thing I just want to point out here that I think is worth reflecting on, even if a little bit, while I accept the chapter and verse divisions because they're really, really helpful, they're not in the original texts, obviously, right? Most of us know this. The manuscripts that we have, even the fragments, the whatever complete manuscripts we have, the most ancient ones, right? The text is just continuous. Right? There are no chapter verse divisions in the text. That was given later by the Catholic Church, by the way. But still, the text is continuous. It actually reads much like the temple of God was opened, and the Ark of the Covenant is seen in the temple, and this great sign is a woman clothed with the sun. Again, right, if you want to talk about where Catholics get all this imagery of Mary as the Ark of the New Covenant, this is where you look, right? It's the sign of the ark in the sky here in the Apocalypse of St. John. It's the parallels between the ark in 2 Samuel and in Luke's gospel, right? And it's all these other things that we point out. And again, I don't want the video to go overly long, so I think I will end it here. Just a couple of things to point out. And again, right, that the Hail Mary is in the Bible all put together like that. And I just wanted to point out some of the places where this comes from today, right? All righty. I don't know what the next topic of next video might be, but I'm open to suggestions, comments, if you wanted to leave some in the comments of this video. All right. Thanks for hanging out with me. See you guys next time.